On this Wednesday night, NATO's landmark decisions. Who's being allowed into the alliance, and the nation now named a rival.
We need to take into account the consequences for our security.
Plus, Canada's new deal in Latvia, denials, and a damning letter. The RCMP's top cop on the political pressure she says she felt. Guilty in the 2015 Paris terror attacks, and the prison sentence in the historic case. And it may be June, but the snow must go on.
It's summer, I'm wearing a t-shirt, and I get to be at the best hill on this earth, I swear.
A Canadian ski resort that is still a winter wonderland.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Eric Sorensen.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took part in a NATO leaders summit in Spain today that made history. NATO countries, including Canada, have agreed to admit Sweden and Finland into the military alliance. It is the most significant expansion of NATO in a generation and a major setback for Russia's goal of containing NATO's power. Russia ostensibly invaded Ukraine to keep NATO from expanding on Russia's doorstep. But the invasion has now prompted Sweden and, most significantly, Finland to join NATO, extending the alliance along all of Finland's border with Russia, more than 1,300 kilometers. It not only establishes a much longer military front directly facing Russia, but bolsters NATO's strategic advantage by almost encircling the Baltic Sea. So NATO is taking a new, tougher stance on Russia, and for the first time, it's identifying the potential security threat from China. Our chief political correspondent, David Akin, has tonight's top story from Madrid.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and other NATO leaders made history, approving a new strategic concept, a kind of master plan for NATO, that for the first time in the alliance's 73-year history identifies China as a potential strategic rival.
China is not an adversary, but of course we need to take into account the consequences for our security when we see China investing heavily in new modern military capabilities, long-range missiles, nuclear weapons.
NATO has not updated its strategic concept since 2010. And that last one, it did not even mention Russia as a threat. That has now changed.
Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, we all know, is the biggest threat to our security since World War II.
As he did 2 days ago at the G7, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky joined NATO leaders by video conference for a closed-door discussion on war strategy. And while NATO forces will not engage directly in combat on Ukrainian soil, NATO leaders vowed to stand by Ukraine for as long as it takes. U.S. President Joe Biden said the U.S. would deploy more naval assets here in Spain, new air defenses in Italy and Germany, and new army units in Romania and Poland.
We're going to make sure that NATO is ready to meet threats from all directions.
This is the biggest overhaul of our collective defense since the end of the Cold War.
As for Canada, it agreed to lead and command an enlarged NATO force in Latvia.
We are stepping up our contributions to NATO in a big way so we can keep Canadians safe and keep doing our part on the world stage.
Canada has been in charge of a battle group of about 3,000 in Latvia since 2016. That group includes about 1,400 Canadian personnel, plus personnel from Spain and other European countries. Now, Canada will lead a brigade. That's 5,000 strong, which means there will be more Canadian troops, though how many more has yet to be determined.
I would like to use this opportunity to thank Anita, to thank Canadian government, and to thank Canadian people for empathy, for understanding about the situation.
Canada is also beefing up its diplomatic presence in Europe. It announced today it would open full embassies with ambassadors in Estonia, Lithuania, Slovakia, and Armenia. Eric.
David Akin in Madrid. Thanks, David. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense says 144 prisoners of war have been exchanged with Russia. It comes as civilians were again the target of a Russian missile strike, this time an apartment building in southeast Ukraine. Ukraine says 5 people were killed and at least 4 more injured when a rocket hit the 5-story building in Mykolaiv. Northeast of there, crews continue to search through the rubble of the shopping mall that was leveled by a missile strike in Kremenchuk. At least 18 people were killed Monday and 20 more remain missing. Ukrainian farmers are struggling to get their grain to global markets. Later in the newscast, we'll explain what happens if they don't and the impact on Canadian consumers. A memorial service delayed by the pandemic was finally held in Nova Scotia today for a veteran RCMP officer killed during the mass shooting 2 years ago that left 22 people dead. Among those paying tribute was the force's top boss, Commissioner Brenda Lucki, who is facing growing allegations that she and the federal government played politics with the investigation into the massacre. Ross Lord reports.
It was here in the community of Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia, where Constable Heidi Stevenson lived and worked for many years.
We knew Heidi, and I knew the family, and she gave her life for us, so we thought the least we could do was show her respect by coming to this.
She was just doing her job, as you know, and this happened.
Stevenson was killed while trying to stop the Portapic gunman after an exchange of bullets. It happened near the end of the killer's 13-hour massacre.
She was powerful, not because she wasn't scared, but because she went on so strongly despite the fear.
At this regimental memorial service organized by the RCMP, Commissioner Brenda Lucki praised Stevenson.
As police officers, taking risk is part of the job. To stand strong when faced with danger, to be brave. Heidi will be remembered for her courage and strength of character.
But Lucki's own character is being called into question by some of her members. The latest allegations come from a letter to Commissioner Lucki written by Nova Scotia RCMP Communications Director Leah Scanlon. The Mass Casualty Commission investigating the massacre posted the letter publicly on the afternoon before the memorial service. The letter is scathing. In it, Scanlon tells Lucki, "You informed us of the pressures and conversation with Minister Blair, which we clearly understood was related to the upcoming passing of the gun legislation." Scanlon recalls a feeling of disgust, and the Commissioner Lucki said by not releasing details of the killer's weapons, Nova Scotia Mounties let the boys down, referring to the surviving sons of a neighboring couple murdered by the gunman. In email statements, Lucki has repeatedly denied interfering with her members' investigation. And Bill Blair, who led the government's gun control agenda, insists he did nothing wrong, dismissing questions about whether he should stay on in cabinet.
Yeah, of course.
In contrast to the RCMP's communication struggles, the memorial service was well delivered. A blend of poignant music and heartfelt memories from Heidi Stevenson's many friends.
We are all incredibly lucky to have had Heidi's light shine in our lives, and I know we'll all carry her love in our hearts forever. Thank you.
Ross Lord, Global News, Halifax.
Police in BC are piecing together the motive behind Tuesday's botched robbery at a bank in Saanich, north of Victoria. 6 officers were injured when gunfire erupted. 3 are still in hospital. 1 is in intensive care. 2 suspects were shot and killed at the scene, and the RCMP are now calling this an attempted murder investigation. Paul Johnson is there tonight. Paul, run us through the chaos that unfolded.
Eric, for those who watched the first few seconds of footage here and mistakenly thought you were watching something that was happening in the United States, you weren't alone. Few would expect we would see such spectacular violence happen in a place like Saanich, BC. When the eyewitnesses tell you their stories, they describe agonizingly long bursts of gunfire. Some say it was continuous.
Oh my God.
Others say it came in 2 volleys. Whatever their vantage point, it was utterly terrifying.
It was just like a machine gun going off. It was incredible. And all the scattering, and then the police came in. And
Paul Arnold was headed out to run errands Tuesday morning, and instead found himself taking cover with a young woman who just missed walking into the bank.
So I just grabbed her, and we fell to the ground, and we went underneath a bush and huddled under the bush until there was 2 rounds of fire.
That no bystanders were injured or killed in such a ferocious daytime gun battle is nothing short of miraculous. Police killed the 2 suspects at the scene, and while it took a few hours to rule out a 3rd gunman on the loose, in the end, the violence was contained to the area around the Bank of Montreal that was presumably the target of a robbery. But police paid a heavy price. 6 officers were wounded, 2 serious enough to need surgery.
And I can say how moved I am at the bravery demonstrated by these officers. They ran towards live and active gunfire.
It's a bafflement that someone would do an armed robbery of a bank on the southern tip of an island. It's a big puzzle to us that this happened.
Still a lot of unknowns. But one intriguing question at this point is, what was the sequence of events that led up to having members of the regional SWAT team here to confront the gunmen? The fact that you had police officers with the weapons and training specifically for this kind of situation very possibly saved lives. Eric?
Paul Johnson in Saanich, BC. Thank you, Paul. In the U.S., there's growing speculation about new criminal charges in the attack on the U.S. Capitol after Tuesday's stunning testimony. The January 6th committee heard about Donald Trump's direct role in plans to interrupt the confirmation of Joe Biden's election win, plans that Trump pushed despite knowing that the mob outside the Capitol was armed and dangerous. Jackson Prosco reports.
Truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Her stunning testimony may change the course of history.
I overheard the president say something to the effect of, I don't effing care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me.
As a former insider in the Trump White House, Cassidy Hutchinson has done what no one else has, drawing the clearest links yet between the violent mob on January 6th and the White House. Testifying, the president knew the crowd of his supporters was armed and yet still demanded to lead them to the Capitol.
The president said something to the effect of, I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now.
After her bombshell testimony, the former president now faces more legal peril than perhaps anyone who has held the office before him.
He not only knows about the violence, but he is fomenting it. He wants to go to the Capitol and be the cheerleader of the violence. This put Trump in the land of seditious conspiracy and inciting a riot.
That's if the Justice Department chooses to act. Members of two violent extremist groups, the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, already face seditious conspiracy charges of their own. Whether Trump or his inner circle are next is now a much more urgent question.
As soon as you think you've heard everything about what happened on January 6th, it turns out it was worse than we thought.
Members of the Secret Service are reportedly set to respond to some of Hutchinson's most damning allegations. Politically, there's now a sense Trump may emerge from the hearings too damaged to mount a comeback in 2024.
I've been defending him. But after yesterday, when she testified that he knew that there were guns on property and that he still encouraged people to go down to the Capitol, that certainly changes my mind.
The overwhelming response from Republicans has been stunned silence, a clue as to how damaging her words truly were. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
Musician R. Kelly has been sentenced to 30 years in prison after being found guilty of sex trafficking and racketeering. The judge called the crimes calculated and carefully planned. One victim says Kelly is a Pied Piper who lured women and children with his money and fame. His lawyers say they will launch an appeal, arguing the singer himself had a traumatic childhood and deserves leniency. The verdicts are in. Coming up, the end of the trial into the Paris terror attacks. Plus, high honors. Who's getting the Order of Canada? In one of the biggest trials in the history of France, the sole surviving member of Islamic State extremists who terrorized Paris with bombings and shootings in 2015 has been found guilty on all charges of terrorism. Salah Abdeslam was part of a group that killed 130 people and injured almost 500. The latest tonight from Crystal Gomansing.
Salah Abdeslam is just the fifth person in France to be sentenced to life imprisonment with no possibility of early release. On the night of November 13th, 2015, Abdeslam failed to blow himself up. He agreed to participate in a terror attack but didn't detonate his belt. He told the court he changed his mind. He couldn't do it. But he was still found guilty of murder and being a part of a terrorist enterprise. Another 9 members of a jihadi cell, including Abdeslam's brother, did carry out coordinated strikes on multiple locations in Paris, including the Bataclan concert hall. 130 innocent people were killed. The verdict that has just been delivered today is a verdict that is fair to measure and, above all, courageous. The landmark case was heard in a specially built courtroom, involved some 300 lawyers, and included testimony from hundreds of witnesses. Abdel Salam was just one of 20 men on trial. The others faced charges related to assisting the killers. The court found all but one man guilty on all charges. 6 of the defendants were tried in absentia, believed to be dead. We all feel objectively tired, mentally tired, physically tired. 10 months is a long duration. Victims and families are still processing the verdicts and the sentences, but they could be seen as a deterrent when it comes to acts of terrorism. Crystal Gamanson, Global News, London.
Still ahead, the looming global food crisis as Russia's war in Ukraine drags on. Before Russia's invasion, most of the food produced by Ukraine was exported through its 7 ports on the Black Sea. It was enough to feed hundreds of millions around the world. But in the past 4 months, the world's breadbasket has shut down, causing upheaval in global grain markets. Efforts are underway to broker an agreement to reopen some of those routes. But as Sean O'Shea explains, time is running out to avoid a much larger crisis.
This is the world's second largest exporter of grain. A little known fact about a very large country, how Ukraine plays a big part in feeding the world. Something this government agriculture official tells me is plain to see from above. If you fly in a plane and watch Ukraine, there is no land not sown. Everything is used, he says. Most, anyway. Despite the war focused here in Ukraine's east, farmers have planted about 2/3 of the land they'd normally seed for the summer. But that reduction isn't the looming problem.
The main challenge for all of us, how to sell the grain which will be produced and which is growing now.
The war here has altered how growers move their grain to market.
General capacity, not enough. It's real bottleneck. Not enough railway, not enough storage facility.
Ukraine's Black Sea ports have been mined. Ships can't get in to get the last crop out.
I believe there's 25 million tons of grains there, and it can't be moved. Nobody has access to that. The worst is actually ahead of us because of the conflict in Ukraine.
The war here in Ukraine spells trouble for world food supplies, according to experts, and Canadians will feel the effects too.
If access is not a problem, then food affordability is, with prices going up, and Canada is actually not immune to this. We're seeing prices going up in Canada as well.
The Middle East, Africa, and Europe depend on Ukraine's wheat and other crops.
It's extremely difficult to export grain from Ukraine.
A reality dictated by Russia when it invaded.
You're basically weaponizing food when you do that, and that's exactly what's going on.
Triggering what Sylvain Charlebois says will be a global food security crisis in the weeks and months ahead, no matter how much Ukrainian farmers are able to produce this summer. Sean O'Shea, Global News, Kharkiv.
People in the Alberta Rocky Mountains are skiing in the middle of summer. I'm Heather Urix West near Banff, Alberta. I'll have that story coming up on Global National.
Governor General Mary Simon revealed the newest appointees to the Order of Canada. Among the 85 notable Canadians, Golden Globe-winning actor Sandra Oh, former sprinter and Olympic gold medalist Donovan Bailey, and Ethel Blondin Andrew, the first Indigenous woman elected to Parliament and the first to serve as a cabinet minister. All will formally receive the order's insignia in a ceremony at a later date. Well, most Canadians have swapped their winter boots for flip-flops, but not so in the Alberta Rockies. There's still so much snow there that a mountain resort has reopened for skiing. As Heather Urix West reports, even as it warms up, they hope to keep the ski runs open till at least Canada Day.
They arrived in shorts and ski boots, tank tops and helmets, ready to take part in something surprising. A chance to hit the slopes in June and July.
Well, it's summer. I'm wearing a t-shirt and I get to be at the best hill on this earth, I swear.
Sunshine Village ended its winter operations in late May, but the spring was so cool, a lot of this year's snow stuck around.
The suggestion came up in June as we were approaching our summer operations, and we saw how much snow there still was.
It's only a few green runs, and conditions, admittedly, are not fantastic.
I mean, it's a bit sticky for sure, but you know, beggars can't be choosers when it's June.
The unusual opportunity to ski and snowboard in the summertime isn't unprecedented here at Sunshine Village, but it has been a while. The last time the ski hill opened for skiing and snowboarding on Canada Day was back in 1991.
It seemed like there was a little more snow in 1991, but I wish they did this more often.
He's always told me stories about like, oh, 1991, I skied Canada Day. You gotta get out there someday, and so I've been waiting for it.
So it's great that they can ski there, but that also tells us a lot about the snow conditions throughout the Canadian Rockies.
John Pomeroy studies how climate change is impacting Canada's mountains, and while a snowy winter and a cool spring is good news right now, the wild variability from year to year is all a part of the changing climate.
A year ago that we had the extreme heat, with temperatures up near 40 and even above.
This year, though, temperatures in the mountains through Canada Day are expected to remain relatively mild, giving snow bunnies one last unexpected hurrah. Heather, Eurex West, Global News, near Banff, Alberta.
That's amazing. And that's Global National for this Wednesday night. I'm Eric Sorensen. For tonight's Your Canada, we'll go from Sunshine Village to the sunrise over Innisfil, Ontario. We love seeing Your Canada. Please keep sending your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here again tomorrow night.